We're focusing on Bangladesh as of now. Bangladesh is on the boil. Unrest and violence seen across the country. The killing of a youth leader has sparked protests and violence, and it has also reignited concerns over the status of minorities, especially Hindus, in Bangladesh. And it has raised questions over the future of the elections and escalated a war of words with neighbor India. Now, India has rejected misleading propaganda in sections of Bangladeshi media over a protest held in front of the Bangladesh High Commission here in New Delhi. The protest was held against the killing of a Hindu man in Bangladesh. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal said that there was no breach of security or threat to the diplomatic mission, and a handful of 20 to 25 people were there for a few minutes only. But Bangladesh took the confrontation further. It rejected India's comments, questioning how the protesters were allowed to come so close to the installation in a secure diplomatic enclave. Bangladesh's Foreign Affairs advisor Tauhid Hussain threatened to scale back Dhaka's diplomatic presence in India if the situation deteriorates. Ironically, India temporarily shut a visa center in Dhaka following a march by a large group of anti-India protesters towards the Assistant Indian High Commission in Chittagong on Thursday. The crowd even pelted stones. India also had to close two visa application centers in Khulna and Rajshahi due to the ongoing security situation in Bangladesh. Compared to these, the protests in New Delhi were far peaceful and involved only a handful of youth. Now, the recent surge in violence in Bangladesh came after the killing of youth leader Osman Hadi. Hadi was shot on the 12th of December in Dhaka by masked gunmen during an election campaign. He died while receiving treatment in Singapore on Thursday. His death sparked massive protests as well as violence. A Hindu youth, Deepu Chandra Das, was lynched by a mob, beaten to death, stripped and then hung by a tree in the public and burnt. He was accused of blasphemy with no evidence found against him. In another attack, a mob reportedly torched the house of a BNP leader in Lakshmipur area. Reports say that Bilal Hussein's house was locked and set on fire by some miscreants. While Bilal and his two other daughters suffered severe burns, his 7-year-old daughter could not survive the attack. She was locked inside when the house was set on fire. BNP is a major political force after outlawed Awami League of Sheikh Hasina. Bangladesh is set to hold elections in February 2026. Election Commission held a high-level meeting with representatives of the Army, Navy and Air Force in presence. The agenda was law and order situation ahead of the polls. And hours before this meeting, the chiefs of Bangladesh's Army, Navy and Air Force, they also met with the election commissioner. Meanwhile, acting chairman of Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Tariq Rahman, called upon all political parties that believe in democracy to remain united in the interest of safeguarding the country's democratic future. Rahman said that coming days will not be easy and different forms of anarchy have already begun or are being instigated in various parts of the country. The editor of the Daily Star reacted to an arson attack on media organizations. Mehfooz Anam said that in Bangladesh's 53-year history, no media organization had ever faced an arson attack like the recent one targeting the Daily Star and Pratham Alo. Anam urged political parties to recognize and accept critical journalism as a fundamental pillar of good governance. Now, I'm being joined to discuss this further by Dr. Constantino Xavier, Senior Fellow for Foreign Policy and Security at the Center for Social and Economic Progress. And I'm also being joined by Ambassador Veena Sikri, the former Indian High Commissioner in Bangladesh, and is in Bangladesh. I wanted to start with Ambassador Sikri. Ma'am, do you feel Bangladesh is in confrontation mode with India as the elections are now just a matter of weeks away?
Well, actually, one has to first realize that this interim regime in Bangladesh is not a constitutional body. It's an illegitimate body. And they have called elections in a partial manner. That they have banned the Awami League and banned Jatiya Party and many other parties from taking part. Now, Bangladesh elections at the best of times are fairly violent and fairly volatile. But at this time, when you're banning the largest single party of Bangladesh from taking part, it has led to a real spurt in violence. And accompanied by this also, as you pointed out quite correctly in your summary, that the attacks on the minorities, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, the Sufis, and the Ahmadiyyas, this has been going on since the 5th of August. Sheikh Hasina's plane had barely left Dhaka, and you saw the people just attacking the minorities, trying to force them to leave the country. The people who are in charge in Bangladesh, which is the Jamaat-e-Islami, backed by Pakistan. Of course, the regime change operation was done by Pakistan through Jamaat-e-Islami with the backing of external powers, as we well know. So now the thing is, having done that, you have a regime which has installed itself and which is actually in violation of the constitution of Bangladesh. But even if you have a provision for a caretaker government, it has to be a non-party caretaker government, which again, provision was violated. And Dr. Mohammed Yunus himself is going abroad in China and talking about Northeast India and claiming that only Bangladesh has access to Northeast India. And these kind of provocative statements combined with attacks on minorities has certainly led to a very difficult situation in bilateral relations. But right now, what India is most seriously concerned about is that the elections must be free, fair, and inclusive. Unless they are inclusive and participatory, they will not be credible. And if they are not credible, the people of Bangladesh are going to continue their instability, continue their unrest, and continue this kind of violence, which is very difficult for India. And we want Bangladesh to be democratic, stable, and prosperous. And to give you an example of the situation, when Osman Hadi was shot at and killed, immediately, within minutes, literally, the Indian High Commissioner is called in to the Dhaka Foreign Office and said, "Oh, India is responsible for this, and he's escaped into India. Now, please, you got to do something." Of course, India said we got nothing to do with it and we don't interfere in anybody's internal affairs. The people's friendship between Bangladesh and India is very strong. Then immediately after that, of course, India called in the Bangladesh High Commissioner and conveyed our views in no uncertain terms. But subsequently, the Bangladesh police authorities have virtually had to, eat humble pie, and they recognize that the person who is responsible for the shooting is a political associate of Osman Hadi. They were seen together at political rallies all the time, and the authorities admitted that there's no evidence the person has gone to India.
Understood.
And we owe us an apology. And against that, and of course, in the meanwhile, the Indian High Commission in Bangladesh was attacked. The Assistant High Commissioner in Rajshahi, Khulna, and Chittagong were attacked. And now the Tawhid Hussain has the gall to say that why did somebody come outside? 25 people came outside the Bangladesh High Commission.
Absolutely.
So this kind of posturing is creating a very unseemly situation. But the only answer is to carry on the government of India's strong insistence on inclusive and participatory elections. Whoever wins is fine. The Bangladesh people themselves have shown that 70% want Awami League to participate.
No, Ambassador Sikri, I get your point, and it needs to be inclusive. And of course, all that has happened in the last more than 1 year, of course, ever since Sheikh Hasina's ouster, one would have assumed that Awami League, perhaps when the party was contesting, that is when we were seeing a lot of violence. But now the Awami League is nowhere in the scene, and still the kind of violence that Bangladesh is seeing is uncontested as of now, because the kind of attacks even on media houses, these were never seen in the past. I'd like to bring in Dr. Xavier here. Sir, your opinion on what is going on as of now. Awami League is no longer in the scene. Still, the kind of violence and unrest across the country in Bangladesh, is it just another election mandate where they keep India in focus?
I think the first point is on the Awami League not being in the scene. I'm not sure I agree with that. The Awami League is present. It's present abroad with members of parliament in the party that have found refuge and have escaped the country, have been persecuted in many cases and going through difficult situations, including, of course, Sheikh Hasina, who is here too in India. Second, the Awami League is also present in Bangladesh in very dire circumstances, but it's certainly making in different ways, some symbolic, some peaceful, maybe some more or less violent, its own view across the country. So that's one. The Awami League has not completely disappeared. It is present and it's making itself heard and wanting to run for elections as soon as possible. Second, though, I think the ship has sailed on the Awami League running in February in the elections. Of course, we can speak about inclusivity. Ideally, the Awami League in the democratic elections should be running. The pressure is legitimate. Within the Awami League, people I have spoken to have made that claim. But frankly, they also recognize that they are not prepared to run as a party in February. It is just too late. They're not prepared. They won't be able to do that. What they are doing, and which may be leading also to a lot of these tensions now, is they're trying to put up the pressure to say, we want to return to politics in Bangladesh post-February. We don't want to remain banned, which is an undemocratic move by the Yunus interim administration, but we want to return to politics in one way or the other. Now, standing between that return to politics and the future is, of course, the person of Sheikh Hasina, who within even the Awami League has refused to give up power. So we shouldn't be surprised that there's also a very interesting debate going on among Awami League supporters on what the party should look like. What should the Awami League contribute to the future of Bangladeshi politics?
Understood. Ambassador Sikri, Dr. Xavier is suggesting a very different opinion. He comes and he says that the Awami League is not absent. Even though they've been barred from these elections, they've been dismantled by the Yunus government pretty soon after they came into power, but they are still very much present and they do have will to get into politics, though the time is very short. That ship has sailed. Ambassador Sikri, as of now, do you feel any party is trying to stop elections in Bangladesh, pardon me, or any other zone, any other body is trying to interfere?
I think 2 points to Dr. Xavier. First of all, he perhaps hasn't read the interviews that Sheikh Hasina has given to the New Delhi Post and to the ANI over the last 2 days. She is very firm on inclusivity. She is very firm on Awami League taking part in the February election. This business about the ship having sailed might be something in the minds of people who don't want the Awami League to participate. Certainly, I think why there should be an attempt by an illegitimate government. That's another point Dr. Xavier didn't answer. How does he consider this to be legitimate government? How can they be taking these decisions? The people of Bangladesh don't recognize the government. They know it's illegitimate. So the point is you install somebody from the outside, from the top, helicopter somebody into a position, and then say that those decisions are illegitimate, are proper decisions. They are not. So I think the first point to know is, why is all this violence happening? It's happening within the country. You cannot say the Awami League disappeared because they are very much there. Their vote bank is intact. And I think this is what Mohammed Yunus is scared of. He knows the vote bank is intact. Jamaat Islami knows the vote bank is intact. They know if the Awami League is there, it'll be very difficult for them, because despite their best efforts of the Jamaat Islami over the last 18 months, their popularity hasn't gone up. They don't have any support. And now they want to do this by inflicting this violence on the country, by preventing the Awami League from participating in the elections. The only answer is to bring in inclusive and participatory elections. Let it be a credible election. Let it be, the people of Bangladesh want this election. We know that Mohammed Yunus did his best to prevent the election. Reform, 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 again unconstitutional, there's no mandate for reform, and so on. But it's the pressure of the people that has brought him to declare elections in February. The next step he's trying to do is to prevent Awami League. That too has to be overturned, and Awami League has to be allowed to participate. Whose ship has sailed? How does Dr. Xavier decide that the ship has sailed? On what basis?
All right, Ambassador Sikri, now let me go over to Dr. Xavier. Over to you, Doctor, to respond to what Ambassador Sikri is saying. Of course, this is not a legitimate government, it's a caretaker government, and what right do they have to disband a party? It should be inclusive. Your response?
Yeah, I mean, whether I have preferences or we all have preferences may well be true. We do analysis and to understand what might be happening and predict to the best extent of our information and knowledge based on what we understand. I was recently in Bangladesh for a few days and had interactions with across the spectrum, different people. Of course, Sheikh Hasina is saying what she wants to say, which is hold the elections. My assessment is that even within the Awami League, certain people have realized and are realizing that they will not be able to run for these elections in February. That's an assessment. Let's see if it holds true or not. Now, whether the pressure now on the interim government, yes, which in many ways is a legitimate government, I think that ship has also arrived, and we have seen what it has done in terms of damage to Bangladeshi's politics. And that's exactly why we're having these elections in February now. Let's remember that Professor Yunus wanted to have 4 years of reforms and entire reset the country without any mandate to do so. The fact is that he's now shrunk that horizon and he's finally seen the reality, which is elections have to be held, which is exactly why we're having elections. Now, whether we think it's fair or not, we may have different assessments. The fact is that the protests that we're seeing in Bangladesh are not Awami League protests. There's no mass protest saying, please let the Awami League run. The protests we're seeing are actually doubling down and radicalizing against the Awami League, possibly running or playing any role in that. So given those circumstances, my assessment is the Awami League will not run in February, but has, of course, stepped up its own pressure. Therefore, Sheikh Hasina's statements that it wants to return to Bangladeshi politics post-February as soon as possible. If it does not step up today, over these days, which we're seeing now, it will lose the possibility. Because post-February, if we have a BNP elected government, for example, and the ban remains, there'll be little pressure on Dhaka and whoever runs in Dhaka to let the Awami League come back to power. What we're seeing now is a prelude to the post-February politics in Bangladesh in the form of the Awami League putting up the pressure and saying we want to be included in the future of Bangladesh politics. And of course, making the maximalist position that we want to run elections in February, which is impossible at this point.
Understood.
B, we see competitive nationalism among all the other parties. The protests we're seeing that are extreme, radical, and pushing this anti-India sentiment that Ambassador Sikri was mentioning are, I think, from the radical party, more and more radical wings of different parties that are trying to gain an electorate running on anti-India sentiments, anti-Awami League sentiments, pre-2024 sentiments, that everything was wrong pre-2024. That's normal in elections.
I hear your point.
It's, of course, a very, very dire situation, but in every neighboring country, we see competitive nationalism and competitive anti-Indianism spiraling often upwards pre-elections.
I hear your point. Dr. Xavier, and from your views, you expect the BNP to be coming to power and relations with India coming to some kind of normalcy very soon. The elections are just a number of weeks away, but we'll wait to see how this one pans out. Ambassador Sikri, Dr. Xavier, thanks so much for joining us here.
Thank you.